In today's video, we're exploring the future of Carey Price in Montreal. We're also taking a look at the future of Peter Mrazek with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the future building of the Arizona Coyotes for their new arena in Tempe. We should be getting some big updates this week, or at least this month for sure. So we're going to explore that a little bit further. Plus, we have some news on a signing and some injury updates. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. Start off with a signing involving the Montreal Canadiens, signing prospect Emil Heineman to his 3-year entry-level contract, which will kick in next year. Heineman is the Swedish prospect that they acquired from the Calgary Flames in the Tyler Toffoli trade just back a few weeks before the NHL trade deadline. So he gets signed, and he's also going to be reporting to the American Hockey League affiliate in Laval on an amateur tryout for the remainder of this season, so they can kind of get him acclimated and used to North America here a bit before next year begins. So he's officially all signed up with the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll see what the future holds for him. A few injury updates tonight. By the time this makes it to YouTube, the games will already be underway, but the Maple Leafs are getting a few players returning. Jack Campbell will be in his first game, making the start tonight against the Lightning. Of course, he did back up the previous game, but this will be his first game in some time since the last injury occurred. And of course, Jake Muzzin is also reportedly supposed to be in the lineup tonight as well. So we'll see by the time this makes it to YouTube, the game will be going. So I'll be able to confirm that, but it should be a couple of big returns here for the Maple Leafs here tonight. I know their fourth line has been kind of getting a bit of a, not really a makeover, but some interesting moving parts, you could say, trying to figure out who are the best pieces to have there on a more regular basis before they hit the playoffs. So we're probably going to see some more, roster juggling here over the coming days as Sheldon Keefe kind of hopefully gets all that sorted out. Now, as I mentioned, we're taking a look at the future. 3 real things here for the rest of this video. We're looking at a couple of goaltenders in the Arizona Coyotes, and let's start with Arizona. Now, obviously, we know that the whole building situation, they're not going to be playing in Glendale anymore. They're going to ASU. They have a 3-year agreement with Arizona State and to play their home games at the much smaller than usual NHL arena, or soon to be NHL arena, which is obviously made for college hockey, which will have a max capacity of 5,000. Some believe that it's actually going to be a fair bit less than that for NHL games, and it could be even under 4,000. But either way, it's significantly smaller than the smallest NHL arena. We do know that for sure. There's obviously a lot of criticism and a lot of people that aren't real thrilled about the situation, including reports that several of the players are not real keen on it either. But, obviously they're NHL jobs. People will play there. We do know that. It's better than not playing in the league at all. But this coming Thursday could be a big day to learn lots of information, possibly some real positive news, maybe some neutral or even negative news. We don't know which way it's going to go yet because there really hasn't been a lot of talk. City council there hasn't really been allowed to talk about things publicly. They recently went through an election as well. So there's some newcomers going to be involved that, they don't really know their prior I guess what their thoughts on the project would have been. But the meeting coming up this Thursday could very well see them kind of break into smaller groups, review this information a lot more closely, and kind of go from there. But apparently we could even possibly get a call for a vote at this meeting. They may decide to completely reject the bid, or they may decide that they want more discussion and more information. So they're going to have a further opportunity to kind of further evaluate and review the whole bid, like the whole process here, and kind of determine what their initial thoughts are. Now, of course, opponents of this bid in the first place are kind of concerned, including the structure of the financing, which I know is, obviously a situation where it's being privately funded, but the structure of that is, a little bit complicated and concerning, especially when you take a look at the situation like I mentioned before. I know I've heard Coyotes fans comment on the channel saying that the owner was going to privately fund all this, but I'm like, well, look at how far they were behind on their bills in Glendale. It just makes you think, makes you really question, I guess, how much cash liquidity they have, like how deep are the pockets there? Have they suffered enough losses that it's just becoming too difficult? I really don't know, but there is concerns over the structure of the financing amongst those in the area that are not crazy about the idea. Of course, another big one too is airport traffic and noise impact, and that's been apparently a very contentious issue, not only now but in the past in that area. I know the Cardinals at one point were considering building a new stadium in Rio Salado, and they ended up going into Glendale because that was the big problem that they kept running into to get anything approved to be able to build in that area. So, could the Arizona Coyotes run into the same sort of scenario? It's a real possibility. So we don't know exactly what we're going to learn on Thursday, but we should have learned something, whether it be, like I said, that they're going to decide to go for a vote. I don't think we're going to get a clear-cut answer that's going to be accepted. I don't think it'll go that far. I think at the very least we're either going to get a rejection or, if further discussion is possible, or they may seem, relatively happy with everything and decide to put it to a vote at a later date. But it is expected that we should have more information sometime within the month of April. So even if the vote doesn't take place at Thursday's meeting, or they don't set the date there, it shouldn't be too far into the future, and we can get a better idea of what's going to happen. And I've seen NHL reporters and insiders talk about the fact here, like, really, if we know, like, in the next month or so, and let's say that assume for a second that the deal gets rejected, is there really any point at that point in them going to ASU? Obviously, I know the NHL, for the lack of time here, probably wouldn't be crazy about them not going to try to find another plan. But I know it seemed to happen pretty fast. The last time we saw relocation was when the Atlanta Thrashers went back to Winnipeg. And I know that seemed to come together pretty quick when you have places that have the arena in place and everything like that. So I don't know. You have to think that if it falls through and they're going to know before they ever play a game at ASU that the deal was dead and rejected, is there any sense in playing there? I know they have this agreement with ASU and this commitment, but I don't know how lenient they would be to let them out if it wasn't going to work out, because it's all contingent on them getting their approval to build the new arena. So we'll see. I don't know that there's, if it's going to happen that way. I'm not suggesting it is. I just know, based on what reports we had heard before from Craig Morgan, who covers the Coyotes closely, and others, that it was far from a slam dunk. There were some real serious issues, like I mentioned here, regarding the structure of the financing, the airport traffic and noise impact, which has run into issues in the area before. And if there's, it was kind of like, the feeling was it was kind of split, and that there was going to probably be one or two swing votes that could swing this either one way or the other, and it was really difficult to tell. Like I said, they also underwent an election, so I don't know exactly if it's all the same bodies. I think there was a few changes there, so it's hard to gauge where this is going. But like I said, if we know this month that it's going to work, great. They can go through their plan to play at ASU, and at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Clearly until they get shovels in the ground and they get going, it's going to be difficult to get too far along, but at least what's going to happen. Whereas, if it gets rejected, is there any point? And does the NHL really need to seriously, really just quickly look at relocation and get them to a new place so they can settle in and just be done with it? But we'll see what happens in that regard. But Thursday should be a big day when it comes to news. As I mentioned, Montreal Canadiens' Carey Price has been practicing more. He's been on the ice more. I know today he was obviously it was pitcher day in Montreal, so he was certainly there for that and did participate as well in practice. And all accounts indicate he's looking good and seems to be making some progress. So there is a bit more optimism that before the season is out, he might be able to get some game action in. Now, at this point, we don't have any kind of confirmation. There's no dates, no nothing to suggest that we're really, like, a game is going to be imminent or close. But based on what we've seen, it just seems, with the amount of time left in the year, that it is realistic. Now, of course, I want to remind you what Elliot Friedman had to say in 32 Thoughts here in the past week, saying that he feels if Price works hard enough to get back, that it's more likely going to be a showcase to see where he might go in the offseason. He feels that he'd be playing somewhere else next year, that the new Habs regime, along with Price, would work together to find a way for him to go play somewhere else. Now, that's not going to be any easy task. And there's another article that I came across today through Montreal Hockey Now. kind of going over the same sort of scenario with the same sort of opinion. They did reference some of Friedman's comments and material, but certainly had their own opinion in there as well, that it seems quite likely that be something that all parties involved would be interested in. But of course, keep in mind, he's making over $10.5 million. Clearly has a lot of say on the situation because he has a no move. Yes, he would waive, I bet, for the right scenario. I know he said all the right things about staying in Montreal. I really think that unless the right opportunity came along, he probably would prefer that. But I think he's probably fair to say that he knows and sees that it probably makes a lot of sense for him to move on if he's able to, if the right scenario presents itself for him and his family, and same for the organization. So again, we don't really have any kind of concrete evidence to suggest he's definitely done with the Montreal Canadiens, but you have to think that that between him and the team, that getting back to playing does make sense. That because if he doesn't do it, I don't think there's any chance he can move, because the team's going to be really reluctant to take on that kind of money. And Montreal's likely going to have to eat a bunch of salary here, up to 50%, maybe even involve a third-party broker to retain a little bit more to get another team to take that on, right? So it's not going to be any easy task, but seems to be more people kind of forming the opinion that he's going to likely play at least a couple games this year, and that means that there's a good chance that it could be a showcase to get him to move on in the offseason, but only time will tell. Also, an article today in The Athletic from Jonas Seigel on the Maple Leafs, talking about a variety of things, including the future of goalie Peter Mrazek. He has the opinion in this article that Mrazek is pretty much likely done as a Leaf, even though he has 2 more years left on his contract. It's been a disastrous year in this contract between the Leafs and Mrazek. Has not worked out in the least. Of course, his injury now that he recently sustained is going to keep him out for around 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. That puts them pretty much right around the time where the end of the first round of the playoffs would be coming to an end. Now, of course, if the Maple Leafs are successful to move on, that tells us that they're likely going to be obviously happy with Jack Campbell and maybe Källgren as a backup. Obviously, the youngster is going to probably be well cemented into that number 2 spot by then, if indeed everything continues to go the way it is, barring any additional injuries or anything else between those 2 guys. But certainly it makes a lot of sense that between the salary cap implications as well as the fact that it just hasn't worked out, that they will try really hard to move on from this goaltender in the offseason. I have to think a few teams that are likely going to be rebuilding might be the most likely destinations for him to go. I know I mentioned before, maybe a team like Chicago, who's not going to have really a clear goaltending path moving forward. Maybe a team like Buffalo. There was reports today about Devin Levi going back to college in Northeastern next year, so they may have to wait on him. They will have a UPL. Maybe Craig Anderson comes back. We don't know. He's obviously going to take his time with his family and make that decision. So teams like that could use a goalie. They may not be obviously as concerned about the results where they're rebuilding. They may not be able to get much of a return. They may have to even offer an incentive to take the contract. But at this point, Seigel believes that there's a really good chance Mrazek has played his last game as a Leaf. Even if the Leafs go deeper in the playoffs, if they ran into a situation where they needed to relieve Campbell, then obviously the youngster Källgren is likely going to be the guy that they call to next instead of Mrazek, where he hasn't really had many games this year where it's really been worked out and been reliable. He does have a lot more experience in the playoffs, clearly, but even his playoff record isn't the greatest either. So we'll see where things go on that front, but it is quite possible we could see a couple of goalies here amongst the big markets in Canada, but possibly moving on in the offseason. So let me know your thoughts on that, as well as the Coyotes and everything else discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.